Sable Island itself is constantly changing, geographically and biologically. But its future is changing even faster, and all at the fault of humans, for better or for worse. These next few decades are a major turning point for most of the world, and though it is essentially a sandbar, this applies to Sable just as much. Climate change is in effect, and we can see its impact across the globe already, with a force and looming inevitability like nothing else. Geographically speaking, safety now comes in high altitudes and a generous distance from the shore. Neither of these requirements are viable for Nova Scotia's little golden sandbar. So the island will likely shrink immensely in the near future. This may have horrific consequences, but even so, it's not like Sable has never experienced geographical change. Sable was created over 15,000 years ago during a glacial retreat, and formed as a surfaced ridge along the Scotian shelf. It evolved as a barrier island, rising over the continental shelf almost like a shield, protecting the eastern side of Nova Scotia from the open waters of the Atlantic Ocean. There are some sources that claim that during Sable's early years, it may have stretched so long it touched the mainland, and it is likely that the island was between 10 and 15 times larger than its current size. The 3 different currents it interacts with were constantly giving and taking sand from its shores, shaping it into a slim crescent. And its dunes were formed by the winds coming from its northern and southern beaches. Even after its main formation, the island's dunes continue to change with the winds, and the beaches continue to reform because of natural shifts in currents. This being said, over the past 100 years or so, the island has continuously shrunken at an alarming rate. Pictures taken every decade or so since the early 1900s demonstrate the different shorelines of the island. Not just different shapes, but a drastic reduction in size as well. Again, this could be because of the lack of trees or large plants to bury roots into the body of the island and steady the sand. In this case, Sable is merely sinking back under the sea. It is also possible that the currents that eat away Sable's beaches have become more powerful than the currents that bring sand from the bottoms of the ocean to the island's shores, and the imbalance has caused Sable to lose more of its sand than it gains. There is another possibility, though, which happens to be the most likely, and that is global warming. As the sea levels rise, Sable is becoming engulfed by water, the beaches slowly disappearing. This is the most likely of the hypotheses, because the higher and faster the sea levels rise, the less of Sable we can see sitting above the water. In recent decades, the island has seen a decrease in size of up to 10 meters per year on its south side. This issue was evident even in the early 20th century, and in 1901, an attempt was made to plant trees on the island to stabilize it. Unfortunately, only one of them took root, becoming the sole remaining tree on Sable Island. Tide control solutions on the mainland include rock barriers at the edge of beaches and diversion canals, but on Sable, rocks would either sink into the sand or roll into the ocean, and there is nowhere for such a canal to diverge, with the entire island surrounded by sandy beach. With no suitable solution found so far, there is a sensible fear that the island may one day disappear altogether. The worst part is that this future may not be so far off. Predictions now state that the global sea level will rise a minimum of 2 feet or 60 centimeters by 2100. According to modern topographical maps of the island, most of Sable's beaches are only between 50 and 100 centimeters above sea level, meaning a good portion of them will cease to stay above water. this could lead to drastic changes, especially to the island's famous population of gray seals. There are roughly 400,000 gray seals that come to rest or breed on Sable Island each year, producing up to 80,000 seal pups. Because of the amount of fish in the area around the island, sharks are also quite common, meaning the seals need a place of refuge like Sable to ensure their safety and the safety of their pups. If the beaches are taken away from Sable, the seals will face more danger, as they will either have to climb high sand dunes or take their chances with the awaiting sharks. Beyond the seals, the island itself will take a hit, with an estimated loss of 10 hectares of vegetated area by 2040, and an overwash of seawater in an area full of freshwater ponds. In January of 2015, the island experienced a phenomenon known as a weather bomb, in which one of the roadways became a surging river of ocean water, traveling terrifyingly far into the center of the island. A few years later, a PhD student from Dalhousie University traveled to Sable to monitor the effects of storms Dorian and Teddy, coming to the conclusion that when the island flooded, freshwater from the ground turned into concentrated seawater, and it took a long time for the salt levels to lower enough to be drinkable. This could cause massive problems in terms of the animals on Sable that depend on freshwater, such as the beloved horses. Though the freshwater table is resilient, and the island has undergone many changes during its life, it is difficult to determine where Sable will stand in the course of the next 80 years. Regardless of the many posing dangers, there are some guaranteed positives in Sable's near future, one of which may turn out to be key in eliminating the threats of climate change. The Nova Scotia offshore wind project is one that has been in planning for many years now, but began taking form in 2021. It is one step in a set of goals laid out by the provincial government. First, 80% of Nova Scotia's energy must come from renewable sources by 2030, with zero reliance on coal electricity. Second, Nova Scotia must reach net zero by 2050. Lastly, after the first few objectives are met, the province must regularly produce more energy than it consumes annually, selling all excess to other regions of the country. There have been many different approaches to the fulfillment of these goals over the past few years, but so far, the only one with real traction is the offshore wind project. Nova Scotia in particular is a nearly perfect candidate for offshore wind, and its success will set a good example for other countries. For starters, this little province harbors some of the world's highest offshore wind speed in its surrounding waters. Canada in general has the world's longest coastline, and the east coast has some of the windiest waters on the continent. Sable Island Bank alone could host up to 1,000 wind turbines, each one able to create enough to power 6.5 million Canadian homes. The timeline for this project has been scoped out to the end of 2024, and everything that was supposed to happen by this time has been successfully completed. Between 2021 and 2022, a geospatial analysis was carried out on Nova Scotia's near ocean spaces, essentially mapping the topography of the sea floor in the areas surrounding the province, mostly those on the eastern shore. In 2022, the Government of Nova Scotia met with the European Union to discuss clean energy options. During that same year, they met with Indigenous communities, fisheries associations, offshore wind developers, as well as federal, provincial, and municipal governments. In 2023, they finalized the plan to have 6 offshore wind farms: Sydney Bight, Canso Bank, Middle Bank, Emerald Bank, the Eastern Shore, and Sable Island Bank. Throughout 2024, the Committee for the Regional Assessment of Offshore Wind Development in Nova Scotia has hosted a few public events that have discussed with the community the 6 potential areas for the wind farms. Regional assessment will be finished by September 2024, whereupon the public will be told which, if not all, of the 6 wind farms will be built. The turbines themselves would begin construction within the next few years. Sable Island Bank, specifically, is one of the world's best locations for a wind farm because of its shallow waters and consistent, strong wind. So it is likely that if the project passes the final inspections, the island will have a view of a wind farm on its west side. This is a good thing, as it would secure the island's importance and connection to the mainland, even to those who are not persuaded by its beautiful nature or rich history. It will also help save the island from a slow, watery death brought on from climate change. The more clean energy generated by the country, the less fossil fuels will be burned, which means fewer greenhouse gases sent into the atmosphere to heat up the planet. With a cooler planet, the ice caps will melt less, slowing and eventually stopping sea level rise, which in turn will keep Sable Island above the lashing waves. Despite the overwhelming positives in the plan for offshore wind farms, there is one pressing issue that cannot be ignored. The initiative may not be fast enough. With a lofty timeline that already stretches years into the future, and so many moving parts making delays and restarts likely, there are good chances that we may not see fully functioning clean energy units until the next decade. In response to this, one young Halifax graduate spearheaded a project in collaboration with the Friends of Sable Island Society, with the goal of shedding light on the conservation challenges facing the island. The Sable Island Conservation Initiative was created by a woman named Gillian Ramsay in 2023 as an entry for the Inspired by Sable Island Scholarship Award, which she ended up winning. Ramsay was originally from Toronto, but had moved to Halifax several years prior to receive her master's degree, which she completed in Resource and Environmental Management at Dalhousie University. As part of her university thesis, she was required to connect with an environmental organization and do research on an issue. The opportunity presented itself in the form of Sable's Scholarship Award. She kickstarted the project with the hopes that it would raise awareness and spark change for the conservation concerns surrounding the island. In a summary of her proposal, she wrote, "Visual mediums have the power to reach a wide audience and create a lasting impact in environmental education. A person with little to no knowledge of Sable could see something eye-catching and flip it over to find themselves learning about sides of Sable Island they would have been oblivious to otherwise." This was the point. The way she explains it, the only part of Sable that is widely understood are the beautiful wild horses and the rolling white sand dunes. This is undoubtedly a key part of the island, but balance means seeing both sides of the picture, and with Sable, the other parts seem to be shrouded in mist. The importance of the island's endemic species is often overlooked, even though they share a much deeper connection with the island than the famed horses. The reason for this being that as mammals, and as creatures who value the archetypal ideas of beauty, we tend to care about Sable's horses more than its sweat bee, Ipswich sparrow, and roseate tern. Despite the fact that these smaller creatures, unlike the horses, cannot thrive anywhere else on the planet, so it is vitally important that they are protected. Other commonly overlooked conservational concerns include Sable's shrinking size. If it were to happen quickly, if there were immediate, obvious changes in Sable's shores between 1 year and the next, there would be more action and conversation. Unfortunately, it happens so slowly, and 2100 is too far into the future for most people to begin thinking about dangerous predictions. Then there's the ocean pollution. Uncountable plastic items that wash up on Sable's shores every day, on every side of the island. Sable has it particularly bad because of its placing among the great ocean currents. These mounds of garbage endanger the island's animals, cover Sable's beaches, and act as a reflection of the state of our oceans. To reflect this in a way that would be easily accessible to the public, Ramsay created postcards that explore the island's ecosystem and the urgent need for action surrounding the protection and preservation of the island. She named them the Wish You Were Here, Wish You Weren't Conservation Postcard Initiative, and covered topics such as dune erosion, pollution, and the effects of climate change. Each card has a different image of the island that shows both its beauty and highlights the dreary environmental concerns. They link to online infographics for access to more information about the conservation issues and efforts. The initiative now creates and distributes sets of these postcards locally across the province, as well as online, with the hopes that they will place themselves in hands that will learn about the island and learn why they need to care about both the good and the bad. All the proceeds made from the postcards are donated to future conservation efforts. It may seem small at first, just a selection of pretty postcards with one short sentence, but they spread knowledge across Canada about global warming and our negative impact on the natural world. Sable is going down gracefully, and would likely be called beautiful, wild, and pure until the day it is swallowed up by the sea. It's true that the island is beautiful, but it is not untouched by human influence. All we can hope for is that someday in the future, that influence will only be good. Bringing Sable's non-idealistic side out of the fog and taking action against climate change is the first step to a world where the island and all of its creatures exist and thrive for hundreds of years to come.